While we're doing this, we should do a Zoom and chat introduction if we can use the chat, I think. If folks want to say their name, pronouns, and where they're coming from in the country, maybe. Let's start off with that. Hello, everybody. As folks are coming in, we're putting in the chat your name, pronouns, and where you're coming from in the country. People are still coming in, so we're going to start in a few minutes. We might actually hit 100 people at the start of the meeting. Already at 75.
Because not all the speakers are here, whoever is pushing the button to admit people, please stop at about 95, lest our speakers have to follow on YouTube instead of being able to speak.
So it's a 100-person maximum or 100-person.
Yeah, 100% maximum on the Zoom, and but it is live streaming right now, and I will share the live stream in a minute.
Great. Thank you.
Live stream link.
Welcome, folks. As we're coming in, we're doing our name, pronouns, and our where we're coming from in the country. We're going to start in a minute or so. While we're doing Can someone do a quick check of any speakers who are missing from the list of people who are in? As folks are coming in, hello, everybody. We're doing our name, pronouns, and where we're coming from in the country in the chat. And we're going to start in, let's say, a minute. We've got a few final stragglers coming on. Okay, I'm going to get started. Thank you all so much for being here. This is an incredible turnout for a Thursday night. Really appreciate you all taking your time out of your nights to be here. My name is Aaron Naraf Fernando. I use he, him pronouns. I hail from the People's Republic of Astoria, Queens, New York, part of New York City DSA. I was a field captain on the Zohran Mamdani campaign for mayor, helped on the back end, helped create the universe for the campaign. And I'm really excited with where we are right now and how far our electoral program has come in New York City. And I'm really excited because not only have we won the primary, we have a general election to work on as well in the coming weeks. You're going to hear a lot more from the campaign about how people can get involved in the coming days. Um, we are also have a DSA National Convention coming up in just over a week. And the intersection of those two things is really important to me. I know a lot of other folks on this call because our national convention is we're seeing a lot of excitement about Zohran's victory from folks all over the country, and a lot of those folks who are going to be in Chicago. And we're seeing a genuine wish to learn about this victory and what it all means. And part of that comes from, our wonderful comrades in Socialist Majority Caucus. A lot of folks on this call, the speakers are on this call are all members of Socialist Majority Caucus, myself included. Um, and people want to know what successes of the Zohran campaign can they take away from their own chapters. So we've hosted this call, have a great lineup of speakers who want to share their thoughts and lessons from the Zohran Mamdani campaign, as well as other campaigns across New York from the Middleton Valley and Ithaca. We have two great Democratic nominees for City Council up in upstate New York who are going to be sharing their perspectives. If anyone you are seeing cannot join the meeting right now, I believe we have a maximum of 100 people on this call. So if they cannot join this call right now, they can watch this live streaming on YouTube. So there is a live stream link on YouTube that someone can drop in the chat. That would be great, just so folks have it. Um, but yeah, right now in this moment where we have a convention coming up, we have a general election for Zohran Mamdani, we have Trump in the White House. We're seeing this real anxiety now where we are going to be heading up well, hopefully, as long as everything goes well, we are going to be heading up the largest city in the country with a Democratic Socialist and proud DSA member and leader as mayor of New York City. Well, the question here is if socialists can govern in the face of a hostile federal government and a Democratic Party establishment that wants to tear us down. We're also seeing there are other sides, other perspectives on electoralism, and there are definitely going to be at convention some opposing viewpoints about how we should approach electoralism. And we want to present our own vision from what we've learned on the Zoran campaign and other campaigns upstate and elsewhere in the country. We want to present that perspective on electoralism, and so we want to present that perspective to folks, and hopefully folks can learn from that and take that away for their own chapters and for the upcoming convention. So today's meeting, we're going to talk about a few different aspects of party building, which is one thing that was very important to all of us and something that is the main topic of this call. We're going to talk about party building generally and our theory of how to do that. We're going to talk about electing socialists and building DSA. We're going to talk about co-governance. And finally, we're going to talk about winning everywhere, even beyond New York City, and how we can win in other parts of the country and other parts of New York State. Okay,
What's that?
let's kick this person out, or whoever's doing this, can we kick this person out? Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to start first. Our first speaker is going to be the co-chair of New York City DSA, Grace Mouser, also the former recruitment chair for New York City DSA, who's going to be talking about the courage to assume power, and what are the considerations in contesting executive power. Grace, all yours.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everyone. Very good to be with you. Apologies if there's people are doing karaoke downstairs. I'm at a coalitional retreat right now. But I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited about convention next weekend. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about some of the considerations that we as a chapter had before endorsing Zohran and how we're thinking about that co-governance responsibility now. The truth is that like it really was, and honestly it remains kind of scary to contemplate having executive power, right? New York and many other chapters across the country have built a, not huge, but a decent base of legislators who wield, individual legislative power, who work as a block. But they still have some cover, right? When really bad decisions are made, like they are not truly in charge. The buck doesn't stop with them. And that allows them to both be insiders, but also outsiders and critique from the outside either. Once you're an executive, you don't really have that power, even if, not everything that happens is entirely within your control. And this was honestly discussed as a reason not to run a mayoral race. And I think it was it was certainly something I seriously considered, and I know many other comrades did the same. But in the end, many of us, I think, reflected on the fact that, we have to have the courage of our convictions, even if it is actually scary to do this. If we believe that we have a better model for governance and we believe that we have better plans and better ideas, we have to seize on opportunities to actually execute those things. What that meant and continues to mean in practice is that we need to be prepared to have a bigger footprint than just the pure number of our members. That means we have to be ready and willing to work in coalition, including in coalition with people who are not always totally aligned with us. These last, I guess it's only been a month since Zoran won, but something I think about a lot is, we have no permanent friends and we should have no permanent enemies. And we have to have our eyes on a goal, on an agenda. And this means we need to be able to move fluidly among potential coalition partners with the people who want to work with us. This, on the whole, though, also means we need to carve out a way for us to work, us as DSA, for us to work with an executive. Right now, the model that exists, certainly on the left, of working with a powerful politician is to either be an external force holding that politician accountable, or to be a force that runs cover for them, that, covers up their mistakes or provides them an out when something goes wrong. But we now, as a chapter, and I hope as a national organization too, need to develop a new third thing, right? And to me, that third thing is co-governance. We have some experience with that in a legislative setting, but it's a new task for us to do it on an executive level. Like, we don't have all the answers yet, but we know that we need to work as a partner and not as an external force. That will mean there are a lot of tensions. We're navigating a scenario now where one of our candidates is more powerful and has a bigger footprint than DSA, but we also know that he's committed to the chapter, to the project, because he came from that. He came from the chapter and the project. So what infrastructure do we need to put in place to actually make that partnership happen? I truly don't have the answers yet. There are open tabs on my computer with drafts of plans that various people are working on. We're lucky in New York City, and I know we're lucky throughout the country to have very smart people who want to create these plans, who want to create permanent infrastructure that make this type of co-governance possible. And I feel confident that we'll be able to do that. It is, kind of scary though. But the real thing we need to have in mind as we approach these problems is that to me, it's a form of cowardice to retreat to the comfortable position of a critic, of an external force. That is a position that is weaker, but it's also more familiar for leftists. But if we keep retreating to that familiar, comfortable position, we will literally never have the power we need to actually affect change. And so we have to take these big swings. We have to take chances. We have to accept that we as GSA are going to mess up, that the candidates and the elected officials that we put forward are going to mess up, and be able to have structures that can absorb that can correct for that without tearing ourselves apart over it. This is a hard project. It's a scary project, but if we're going to build a world and a future that is sustainable, that creates a society where our children and grandchildren can exist, it's simply something we have to have the courage to do. So I don't have all the answers. I don't think anyone does, but we do have the opportunity in New York to figure them out. And I think we can create those opportunities elsewhere as well. So I will stop there. But thank you, and I'll pass it back to Erin. I'm excited to build this with my comrades in New York and all around the country.
Thank you so much, Grace, for all of that. Really appreciate that. Next off, we're going to pass it off to Michael Kanukin, who many of you may know him from his writing over the many, many years, well before my time. He is a veteran of New York City DSA's electoral project and is currently a member of our healthcare OC. And he is going to talk about what form can the party take, the legal and political constraints that shape party building efforts in the United States. Can we discipline elected officials in any meaningful way? And is there any advantage to be gained by running on a line other than the Democratic one? So, Michael Kanukin, that's going to be all yours.
Thank you, Aaron. It's really terrifying to hear you say before my time, right? It speaks to, I'm not even 40, guys. I didn't deserve that. But yes, I've been involved in New York City DSA electoral project since the beginning, which was not that long ago. I remember having long, tough conversations in 2017 about whether New York City would elect even a single person who identified as what we used to call openly socialist to the state legislature. And now here we are in this really hopeful and also sort of terrifying moment. And I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be a socialist organization that engages in elections as a serious part of our work, because to me that is the question of the party, which has sort of bedeviled the U.S. socialist movement for a century. What is it for us to be a political party or to become a political party, depending on your perspective? I would say a political party is just definitionally a organization of people in civil society outside the state, right, who organize to advance their politics, their political perspective through elections, right? A very simple, minimal definition. That's what parties were from the beginning, right? That's what electoral parties were as they emerged in 19th century mass democracies. It's what they still are. And as as mass politics and sort of liberal democracy has developed, parties have been in many places sort of institutionalized into the state, and so you have rules that are laws, right, that have the force of law about how a political party can organize itself, what it takes to be a political party, how many votes you need to get as a political party to enter parliament in some places, what control the party as a civil society organization has over its elected officials. In functioning liberal democracies, you have that kind of institutionalization of what it means to be a party. In the US, you have a sort of opposite development, where the legal structures that sort of undergird the party system in the US make parties really weak as institutions, but also make the two major parties almost inevitable. So we have, on the one hand, we have all of this sort of first past the post, single member district, presidential system stuff that makes it really hard for third parties to advance. But on the other hand, it partly as a reaction to that, we have this development where political parties as sort of civil society institutions outside their elected officials are incredibly weak in New York. And you can tell because the people who occupy and control the civil society organs of the Democratic Party hate our guts, but we keep beating them in primaries. They don't get to say whether we can run or not run in the Democratic Party. They don't get to, expel us from the party or kick us out of parliament or whatever. In most places in the world, that is what it is to be a party, is to wield that kind of power over elected officials, over membership. But in the US, it's illegal to wield that kind of power. And so the question of the party poses itself really differently for us in the US. And for many years, socialists in the US have thought of the party structure in terms of, can we displace one of the major parties? We in New York in 2017 decided to embark on a really different path, where we return to that basic definition of what a party is. We say it is a civil society organization that advances its politics through elections. And we realized that if we simply put the ballot line question to one side, right, leave it alone for a minute, we can start doing that right now. We can advance, we can be an organization that organizes people and money to win elections and advance our politics through elections in a way that ignores and is sort of not interested in the formal institutions of the Democratic Party, because those formal institutions don't matter. What matters is the legislative caucuses, the donors, all that infrastructure. But the legal structure, who's the state Democratic Party committee chair, those people outside of the donors and the relationships, they're not anything. And so we can build a separate, like a parallel civil society organization. I sometimes joke, we can be a first party, not a second or a third, but a first party in this country, because the actual civil society organization of the Democratic Party, as we all know, is moribund, practically non-existent. And that's the bet we made in 2017, and I think it has been astonishingly successful. By which I mean I'm astonished. I mean, I'm blown away by the progress we've made. And I think it represents a real, a theoretical advance for US socialists to not be trapped in the legal conception of a party and to instead start where we are and start building the party right now. There are problems. Grace spoke to some of the problems. There are a lot more, right? There are problems of accountability. How do we hold our candidates accountable? There are questions of unity, right? Like, what are we holding our candidates accountable to? Especially given that, right, like, we recruit them, we help them get elected, but their districts are bigger than DSA. DSA is not yet a mass party, right? It's sort of a cadre party. There are 10,000 DSA members in New York City, but Zoran got almost 500,000 votes. And so there are a lot of challenges of that shape. I think there's also a growing question of sort of what is the relationship between the civil society organization and the folks it elects? Those are serious problems. And sometimes, and I think we're going to see this at National Convention, because those are such serious problems, people will say, oh, well, like such and such, AOC isn't accountable, this one isn't accountable, we elected a lib somewhere. We need to stop with this Democratic Party ballot line stuff and build a party. There's this fetishizing of the idea of this sort of legal form of the party as though that would solve for us the problems we're facing of co-governance, of accountability, of unity. But the truth is that in the US, that doesn't do anything for us. People are pretending that they have a solution way off there. If we give up on, winning elections the way we've started to win elections and go the long, hard road of, investing in yet another third party sort of campaign that like somehow then we'll have candidates who are accountable. But the truth is that is putting off into the future, into a false solution, some problems that we need to confront in the here and now. And we need to confront them as what we are, as a group of people, an organization that has come together accountable to no one but ourselves as members of DSA, who has chosen to advance its politics through elections. And so I submit to you that we are a political party. And now we have to find out what's next. And I'll pass it back to Aaron.
We might have lost Aaron. And given that, I'll just step in for a moment and say that, first of all, thank you very much, Michael. And second of all, our next speaker is Alvaro Lopez, who is going to, let me see, spotlight. There we go. Who is going to talk to us about recruiting candidates. So this is the second part of the call. The first part was party building. Second part, which is also party building, is specifically electing socialists and building DSA. And so Alvaro is going to talk about recruiting candidates and touch maybe also on labor. Thanks, go ahead. Alvaro. I would love to unmute you. We could figure out how. Says ask to, I guess I can only ask you to unmute, and then you have to unmute yourself, right? That way
Thanks, comrades.
I don't get to
I'm
listen in on
here.
the conversation.
Thanks, comrades. Looks like Aaron was so ready to go build a party, he left. Yeah, it's really excited. I'm really excited to be here, to see everyone here. Um, I think that actually a lot of the stuff that both Grace and Michael touched upon really hits at the core of what we are building in NYC and how we approach both candidate recruitment and how we're approaching our overall electoral strategy. Um, I think for us, there's a couple of important um, requirements that or lens that we use as a chapter when we're thinking about candidate recruitment. I think for one, it starts with the fact that I think Michael said this, we're a 10,000 member, mass member organization, but even for a small city council race, um, we wouldn't be able to just depend on DSA members or affiliates and their votes. That's the goal one day where we can just, put the logo on a pamphlet and hand that out, and we know that that secures a victory, and that's what we're working towards. So, what does that mean concretely? That means that we need to work in coalition, and when we're working in coalition, we're also when we're approaching candidates, we're seeing their potential for one, are they an organic working class leader? Do they have the potential, or do they already have um, a organized base, and are they a part of the left? For me, I think a big part of this is an articulation of a popular vision for the left that sees a socialist movement a key part of it. And I think that's something that, we often get some people who, they check the right boxes, they've read all the right books, and they've maybe been in all the reading groups in DSA. But does that mean that they can actually, project a popular vision for the left? And I think sometimes that question is no. So I think this is where, um, we really, I think, are aiming for a big, a popular vision for the left, and we're also aiming for structural power. And so a lot of that times, this is where labor comes in, where we see, Claire Valdez, who will be speaking later, was a great example of building that structure of power and linking our electoral and labor strategy together. And I think there's also to be said, and I think this is something that for folks who are paying attention to convention, will be this term cadre candidate will be thrown around a lot. And I think cadre means a lot of things for a lot of different people. Um, but for me, I see that there's a tension with candidate recruitment where people kind of want to ignore that there's going to be a natural tension that when we elect someone to state assembly, to Congress, to the mayoralty, um, they're going to have natural capital pressure, right? They're going to have big business and big other forces contending for their attention and also contending for alignment. Um, and the question is, how do we enforce our vision? I think for some people, it's red lines, it's having this amazing program that ensures that we are hitting all these marks. But I think what it actually does is actually it kind of it tries to bubble over those contradictions, and I feel like we instead should actually deal with those contradictions head on and understand that what we need to do is continue and ruthlessly be continuing building our base. So I think that that's for us that's again an organic working class leader, someone that has the ability to organize a base, has the ability to turn out both DSA membership and also the broader working class. So yeah, I think that that's how we approach things here. I think also something to be said with a chapter like NYCDSA, where we're rooted and our base is continually growing. We've actually built a very real meritocracy. I think for some time in New York City, if you were, a Democratic politician, you had aspirations or of some sorts, you got a staff union job maybe with like 32BJ or something, and maybe you joined your local Democratic political club, and then you kind of were owed, a seat somewhere. Um, I think with in our chapter, we've actually really built a real meritocracy where we built a chapter that's rooted and is a university of class struggle, where people from who've been a part of cycles of electoral cycles since maybe 2017, 2018, have actually talked to thousands and thousands of working class New Yorkers about our vision. Um, and that keeps us both rooted, but also is builds up our ability an organization to really develop and build working class leaders. And Zoran is the prime example of that. He joined in 2017, had multiple campaign cycles and under his belt. And I think we really should like, take a step back and really be like, this is an amazing accomplishment we have done, and we have a lot of ways to continue going. But I encourage a lot of other chapters that to really, keep yourselves rooted in mass work and yeah, and I'm really excited to see a lot of you guys in Chicago.
Thank you, Alvaro, very much. Apologies, everyone, for vanishing. My computer just randomly died completely. I had to restart everything. So, worst possible time, but glad I'm back now. And we're going to move on to Magdalena Miranda, who was a field captain on the Zoran Mamdani campaign from the very beginning. You may have seen her in almost every photo or at every canvas, holding down Astoria, especially. She's done so much incredible work on the campaign. It wouldn't be possible without her work. And we're going to have her talk about how we integrate the desire to grow DSA and keep volunteers activated after canvassing is over with other priorities of campaigning, how we keep volunteers engaged, and some of the tough choices, thinking about canvassing versus tabling, and how we organize neighborhoods and constituencies. So Magdalena, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Aaron. So happy to have you all on here right now. Yeah, so I wanted to start off. You probably heard obviously New York State DSA has grown to over 10,000 members. The Zoran campaign had over 50,000 volunteers by the end of the primary with over 400 field leads. And you don't get there by just like not thinking about this and not thinking about how we're growing and how we're plugging new people in. So big way, like canvassing became so deeply intertwined with getting people to join DSA and getting people more involved. I would say what started and what kept people coming back, like how do we even get to the point of 50,000 volunteers that we can now ask to join DSA? It started off with the actual canvases themselves, the way the trainings were run, the way we built up our field leads. I mean, our canvases are the most accessible. We have experienced people. You genuinely can just walk off the street and join a canvas and you'll be ready to go. You're always paired up with a more experienced person, usually a experienced DSA member who will then talk to you about DSA on your way while you're knocking doors. We emphasize having socials after all our canvases so people can get to know each other, building relationships. Obviously, we had like merch, buttons. You got your Zetro card. If you kept coming back, you'd fill it up, get a poster. Yeah, so that kept people engaged. Like you have to give people a reason to come back. And I think we did that both successfully. It comes from like developing relationships and also making people feel useful and like they're actually doing something. And like I've been saying since the beginning, nothing grows DSA like winning. We're at 10,000 members now because we actually ran this race to win and we did it. We won the primary and we're going to win the general and we're going to keep getting new members because of that. The way we get all these new volunteers or people who hadn't thought about politics at all to join, how do we get our 15 and 16-year-old field leads who hadn't thought about this before to join? It's by we had asks at every single level and we'll continue to. It began in the field lead training. So training of 400 field leads. At the trainings, we're emphasizing this is so much bigger than just this campaign. We need you for so much more than just this one campaign. You are building up skills right now that will help us ensure that Zoran has a great mayorality and that we can continue to win and expand. The ask came from building up relationships. When you have the same field lead leading every single week, when you have people coming back every Thursday in Astoria, it kind of turns into a peer pressure thing where it's like, you're here with us, why aren't you joining? Like you hear us talking about DSA, why aren't you joining yet? Why don't you want to help us run the next Iran? You individually, you've knocked doors, you clearly believe in this. Take the next step and help us expand, join the org, help us continue this work. Um, so those are main ways, and we'll continue to do this. Obviously, we had an amazing volunteer appreciation party, which again just became more peer pressure or more evidence for people to join. Like, here's all the things we're doing right now. We provide people with things to do. Like, there's a pause in canvassing right now. Join the Tax the Rich campaign. We need to tax the rich in order for Iran's plans to be successful. Come to an electoral working group forum. Let's talk about what's next. Let's talk about what you can do. How do we expand our base? How do we expand our legislative capacity so that we can continue to grow and build this movement? Because it's so much more than just these three policy platforms and so much more than just the mayor. There's so much more left for us to do. And yeah, and back to Aaron's question about what were some tough choices we had to make? How did we come to emphasizing canvassing in certain neighborhoods? How did we come to emphasizing canvassing to begin with? When you're running to win, when you win, you have to make tough choices and you have to have a plan. I think people want to be useful. When you have 50,000 volunteers, the best thing for people to do is knock doors. They build up skills. You're being forced to talk to people, talk to your neighbors. Like you are physically helping us expand our base. I think canvassing is also something you can feel you're making a difference. Bundling lit, amazing, we need that too, but you're not having conversations and you're not feeling you're actually moving a voter to get to a new place. So I think by like being able to continue our emphasis on canvassing, like people felt like they were actually doing something and moving something and building up skills that they will now use now that there's a bit of a break. They can now go on to the Tax the Rich campaign or join an electoral working group committee and then use those skills to help us build up for our next races and what's more to come. And I think people also felt how we were expanding the electorate. You learn pretty quickly when you go to enough canvases, you can expect there's going to be a rent stabilized building on your turf, which are also kind of the best ones to canvass. You're probably going to, when you're canvassing Astoria, I always emphasize we had 19,000 doors to knock. We have so many people to talk to. People can feel like we're moving on from pass one to pass two. People feel that we're making progress, and people know like we have to go to our progressive bases to run up our turnout score in Astoria. We increased it by over 17 points. And also a huge part of our coalition and our door strategy was, of course, Muslim and South Asian voters. We knew we can rely on those three main constituents. Like that was our goal to win. And now I'm so excited as we go into the general, we can talk to even more people and we can expand our universe and we can decide who do we want to reach out to next. We have so many more possibilities. And now we have all these DSA members, all these volunteers. We're going to trade up new field leads. There's so many more places for us to go and so much more for us to do. I'm so excited to get our army of canvassers and volunteers back out on the streets and to get us to 1 million votes. So thanks all.
Thank you so, so much, Magdalena. Um, with that, we're going to move on to the next portion of our agenda, the co-governance section. And our first speaker is going to be Jeremy Cohen, well known in New York City DSA, former co-chair, has been on our Socialist and Office committees for many years and is now the coordinator for the Federal Socialist and Office Committee. Also an NPC candidate endorsed by Socialist Majority caucus for a convention next week. And he's going to talk about our SIO committees. What do they look like? How often do they meet? What do they discuss? And how much influence do they have? So Jeremy, take it away.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, comrades. Jeremy, he, him, NYCDSA. I hope you can see this is not an I Love NY shirt, but it's an I Love DSA shirt. Though the echo is intentional. So yes, and I am running for NPC on the Socialist Majority Caucus slate. I am here to talk a little bit about co-governance and SIOs because NYC DSA was confronted with this dilemma, especially I think, in 2018, there were two individuals sent into two different houses. Julia Salazar sent to the state Senate and AOC sent into Congress, but they were two sort of solo individuals. In 2020, we had this situation where a whole bunch of socialists went in all at once. And our chapter had had some time to think about, like, oh, okay, we actually kind of have to do something about that. And what do we do? What's our responsibility? What's our role? After we, as someone from the electoral working group once described to me, after we, shoot them in a cannon off into the capitalist state, what is our job? And how do we build an organizing culture and empower both socialist electeds who want to accomplish socialist things in office and our movements so that they are an integral part of the political process and not sort of left behind when a person goes into office, as so often happens in ordinary electoral politics. Um, so we started building what we called Socialists in Office committees to work through this. I've been privileged to be involved in the building of the first one, the State Socialists in Office Committee, that now has 9, I believe. I sometimes mix up the count. Actually, I guess it depends on if you count Zoran or not still, but 9 socialists in office in New York State involved in that committee. Our City Socialists in Office Committee, which involves 2 socialist city councilors. And finally, this year, our new Federal Socialists in Office Committee, which involves building our chapter's relationship with AOC's office. I wanted to take us through a little bit sort of the theory and practice behind SIO committees, because I think that helps ground sort of some of the innovations we've developed in thinking about co-governance and some of the warts and things we need to figure out in the future that Michael in part hinted at earlier. So I think one of the sort of theoretical things that led us to think about this is, I mentioned that shoot people into a cannon. Also, some of us were discussing with people, for instance, who'd been supporters of Bill de Blasio, that the left really didn't have much of an after-election theory in that moment, in de Blasio's moment. Basically, it more or less had the theory of you work really hard to get a progressive elected, and then you kind of hold your breath and wait till they do something you don't like and get ready to denounce them for it. Was the extent of the left's approach to governance. I'm exaggerating a little, but maybe not that much, because of a deep-seated American suspicion of politicians, because of a deep disorganization and disorganized culture on the left, because of a lack of kind of strong institutions. This was really sort of the default position of a lot of leftists, and we wanted to develop a different approach. Part of how we developed that approach and how I have developed that approach is learning from historical examples in the US of when kind of caucuses of electeds have done really important things in conjunction with movements and have held together and have been sort of had one foot in the existing political infrastructure and one foot out. I think the radical Republicans in the Civil War that pursued abolition and radical Reconstruction were an example. So too, learning from comrades abroad that had many unique problems, but many not unique problems. The things they had to negotiate were not that distinct from what we had to negotiate. But they had certain kinds of different conceptual tools for dealing with them. And especially one I want to emphasize, which is those comrades abroad tended not to think of their electeds as electeds over here and organization over here, and the distance between them being a bazillion miles, but instead electeds as part of the organization, as it were, comrades. That is, there are certain institutional facts about parties in other countries that create that. But there is also, again, I think, a deep American suspicion of politicians and a sense of sort of individualism that also contributes to us not being able to think about politicians as comrades involved in a common organizing project that has, many of the same wrinkles and difficulties that any of our organizing projects do. For anyone who's been involved in any organizing projects, lots of calls to make, lots of trust to build, lots of disagreement to navigate, mechanisms for when shit goes really bad, having to deal together with the problem in a way that's constructive, not destructive to the overall project. These are all kind of quintessential parts of organizing culture. What if we thought about how we deal with electeds that way too? Finally, I'll say the one other like last theoretical piece behind SIOs was, sort of once we deal with the money problem as socialists, what leads to the failure sometimes of electeds to do the right thing? Our theory, meaning, they're not supported by corporations. We dealt with the money problem. Our theory was often socialist electeds want to do the right thing, but the capitalist state isolates them in so many ways. It isolates them from other left electeds and teaches them to act as individuals, not as collectives. It isolates them from social movements. Sometimes it literally moves them out of the city for multiple days of the week, like our socialist state electeds that go to Albany. So we wanted to build an alternative to this, think about the relationship between the party and the electeds as a common organizing project of governing together, um, co-governance. What does governing together look like? It involves lots and lots and lots of talking and discussions. One of the key things about our Socialists in Office groups is that they meet very often. They chat, they discuss, they talk about theoretical perspectives and alignment. They talk about strategy. They talk about political analysis. They talk about campaigns. It involves responsibilities towards those of us who organize in that space to develop expertise, to develop our strategic thinking, to build the capacity to mobilize masses in districts, for instance, that are not just where our electeds are, in districts that need more pressure to move socialist legislation that our electeds are championing, but still don't have enough of a chance of actually passing. And so, too, to build power in our electeds districts to organize some of those people who are not in DSA and maybe don't share all of our perspectives, and also, who are maybe part of the multiracial working class that we inadequately represent, to organize those people in elected districts into socialist politics and to ourselves develop as an organization that truly represents all of their interests. So this kind of common working together. So when it's working well, we regularly feel our mutual power and we experience mutual disciplining. One way I think about my work in SIO is I think like, is what I am doing empowering the SIO project? Is it bringing it forward? Is it making it more possible for us to govern as socialists? That, again, does not mean we've solved all the problems. Sometimes there's disunity. Sometimes there's bad moves on the elected's part. Sometimes there's bad moves on the organization's part. Sometimes we have to do criticism. Sometimes we even reach crisis points. But there are steps and a process of organizing together that allows for constructive solution to problems as they emerge, that are similar to the way we create steps in any of our organizing, so that there's not sort of a, either no contact or either everything's going great or crisis split. We don't want that in DSA as a whole. So too, we don't want that with our socialists in office, and we want to build power together and win the world that we deserve.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And our next speaker is going to talk more about what it's like to be in the lion's den in that way. And our next speaker is Assembly Member Claire Valdez, a longtime DSA member, chapter leader, now an elected official in the New York State Assembly representing District 37 in Queens. And she's going to talk about the pressures you face as a socialist in office, the kind of support you need from DSA, what kind of support you receive, and where labor fits in as Claire's background as a UAW organizer. So Claire, take it away.
Yeah, hi everyone. First, I just want to say that this has been a really thrilling call and really enlivened by so many of the contributions by the comrades who have spoken before me. I kind of wish I had gone before Jeremy so I could kind of describe the Lion's Den as Aaron just called it, or the kind of like disorienting and strange pond that is Albany. Um, because when we talk about the pressure that we face as elected representatives who are also DSA members, who are endorsed by DSA, that's a pressure that is experienced, I think, by my colleagues as something else, as cajoling or negotiations, or relationship building. And the reason that we experience it as pressure is because we have built something that is so far beyond the confines of the traditional democratic establishment, that they don't know how to contend with it besides pushing us to split off from one another. And this is often the thing that we see is that leadership might approach one of us and try to kind of cleave us away from the larger bloc. And it's a testament to this organization that they are very often not successful. And we aspire to make sure that they have a worse track record than they already have. But that kind of like um, negotiations or pressures kind of take the form of offering, funding for particular district projects or legislation that might like specifically target our districts, maybe at the expense of something that is a much broader goal of this project and the left movement more generally too. And it's DSA and it's the Socialist Office project that Jeremy just described that really helps cohere us together in moments when it is very difficult to vote a particular way or to make a particular call. And talking about the support that DSA gives us, that is really the basis. So those the material things, the kind of like fundraising, the staffing. When I first was elected, DSA helped me stand up a hiring committee. Those legislative assistants, New York City DSA has an incredible legislative analysis team that helps us tremendously in Albany. These are the kind of like concrete and material things that DSA provides that are essential to making sure that our offices, A, can function, but that also keep us close to the project at times. I'll say the kind of like thing that I did not expect to be the major benefit to me as an elected is just the camaraderie that I have with my other SIOs. Albany is a very isolating place. It can be very lonely. You're far away from friends, family, support. Can't I spend time away from my cat? And having people to go to dinner with, to go to receptions with, to get coffee with, and to do real brainstorming and kind of strategizing and scheming with is such an important piece of my life there. And so I look to Sarah Hanna and Farah and Marcella all the time, so many of my colleagues who are incredible, incredible SIOs. Just to stay sane sometimes. But you also really need those kind of creative partners to bounce ideas off of and to brainstorm with, because one of the things that I found in Albany is that it's incredibly hard to surprise people. They know kind of like what the script is, they know what we're going to say, what we're going to say in conference. But when you can find kind of ruptures or moments of opportunity, like when Homan, the border czar, came to Albany, to really use a moment to show the difference between like our project and maybe some of our colleagues were less willing to do a real confrontation. But it was Marcela Matenas who organized all of us to come up there, who found out where the border czar was, who staked out all the exits and the paths of egress so we could make sure that, we were able to confront him and that Zoran was able to take that moment to really demonstrate his leadership too. So I think a lot about the ways in which DSA provides structure for kind of like opening those moments of opportunity and collaboration that are really hard to find. Um, the question of where labor fits in is funny. So I come out of UAW organizing, and UAW might be the union that I talk to maybe even more than DSA. But the reason that UAW is in a place where they proudly endorsed, not just me, but Zoran was the first union in New York City to endorse Zoran, is because of years and years and years of organizing within the union to elect the leadership that we have now, Sean Fain, Brendan Mencia, to create the kind of like political project that um, very closely mirrors DSA's. That is about building power for the union, leading on issues, leading on strength, and taking very seriously exactly what Grace said at the top of this call, that we have no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. Everyone is organizable, and we can really assess our moment at any given time to decide where we're going to be putting our weight. And so I think that as we build with the labor movement, and there have been many comrades in New York City DSA who've been doing exactly that, building trust with other unions, working to recruit candidates who also have Labor backgrounds. This is how we kind of forge a path forward where we're not just changing the electoral terrain in New York City and New York State and the world, but we're also changing the labor movement and making it exactly the kind of militant rank and file movement that we know it can be. So I will stop there, but I also just want to say thank you all so much for having me. This has been such an exciting conversation. I'm so appreciative of the space.
Thank you so, so much, Claire. So we are going to move on. We have 4 speakers left. Next speaker is Chris Maisano. Chris Maisano is a veteran DSA member. He is on the Flatbush Branch Organizing Committee and a regular field lead on the Zoran campaign. He's going to talk about different ways that socialist parties worldwide keep their socialists in office, quote, in line, especially in executive office, and what the role of staffing is for elected officials worldwide. So I'm going to ask Chris to unmute and he'll take it away.
Great. Thank you, Aaron, and thanks to all of you for being here. And I'm happy to see you all and honored to be asked to speak. So I'm going to try to cover as much ground as I can as quickly as I can. And the place I want to start is by just reiterating, Michael got into this a little bit in his comments. Some other people have alluded to this as well. But here in our country, candidates and elected officials enjoy an unusually high degree of autonomy in our party system. And I think this is because we have uniquely weak political parties, which, among other things, don't actually control the process of candidate nomination. They don't actually control, for example, who is the official Democratic Party candidate for election, for example. It's party electorates, primary party electorates that control nominations. And in many states, you don't even have to be registered with a party in order to vote in a primary election. California is a state where that's the case, for example. So what this means, among many other things, is that the formal or institutional mechanisms for ensuring candidate or elected official accountability to their constituencies, to the platform they ran on, etc., are very weak. Most of the formal and institutional mechanisms that do exist are in the hands of elected officials themselves, such as party leaders in Congress or in state legislatures who control things like committee assignments or PAC money that they give to people who are running for election or re-election, etc. It's no secret, I think, to anyone here that we have recurrent internal conflicts over the question of accountability in DSA. And I think that the search for formal institutional mechanisms to ensure accountability that often crop up in the course of these conflicts they're genuine responses to real problems. But the limitation of them, in my view, is that they rarely, if ever, grapple with the specific and very weird, frankly, realities of the US party system. Parties are not really membership organizations here. But they are in many other countries, and in most other places, only party members can run for office with that party. So in order to run for office, say for, on behalf of the Labour Party, for example, in the UK, you have to join and be a dues-paying member of that party. Do any of you pay dues to the Democratic Party? I don't think so. None of us do. It's just not how the institution works. So let's stay on this example of the UK Labour Party just to get a sense of how things work there. And I think that this will also illustrate why, for example, Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana, and other former members of the Labour Party who are on the left of that party recently split to form a new left-wing party in the UK. Okay, so here's how basically this works. First, any party member in the British Labour Party with at least 1 year's worth of continuous membership applies to the party to run in a constituency. A constituency is like their version of a district. Okay, so you put in your application. Next step, there is something in the Labour Party called the National Executive Committee, or the NEC. This is a central national body within the party that takes all of those applications that come in from all of the constituencies around the country and then creates a long list of potential candidates in that constituency. They are the ones who choose who gets to appear on that long list, not the local party, constituency parties where people are actually going to be running for office. Okay, what's the next step? After that long list is created, it's sent back to the constituency Labour Party in that locality. So, like, for example, Islington in London, where Jeremy Corbyn was a member of parliament for a very long time. And there's a committee there in that constituency Labour Party that takes that long lists and winnows it down further to create a short list. Okay. Now, finally, those candidates who end up on the short list, they campaign within the constituency Labour Party, the local level, like district level organization of the Labour Party. And there's an election. The members, finally, of the party in that constituency vote in order to select the final candidate. So that's a multi-step process in which formal party organizations play an extremely, extremely significant role. And I think that the contrasts with the American party system should be immediately apparent. Neither the Democratic nor the Republican Party have the equivalent of the nationally centralized NEC that exists in the Labour Party. And that's the body under Keir Starmer, the current leader of the Labour Party, that prevented Corbyn from running as a Labour candidate. Even though he had been a member of parliament from that part of London for many, many years, his local constituency party wanted him, his constituents wanted him, but he wasn't able to run, at least not as a Labour candidate. And there was nothing his local party organization could do about it. It was just the decision of the NEC, and there was no appeal. And I think it's the ability of a centralized body like that to deny somebody like a Corbyn the ability to run as a Labour candidate. I think that's a really big reason why he, Sultana, and others have decided to launch that new left-wing party in the UK, because they just simply couldn't, even though they had been Labour members for a long time, and in Jeremy Corbyn's case had been the leader of the party, couldn't even get on a ballot as a Labour Party candidate because his factional enemies wouldn't let him. The Democratic National Committee does not, and it cannot do this. Nor can the various state or county level party committees. So where I live in Brooklyn, and a number of folks here on the call also live, the Kings County Democratic County Committee has no say at all over whether DSA members run in Democratic primaries, and they cannot strip them of the Democratic nomination if or when they win that primary election here in Brooklyn. To run in that primary, a candidate only needs to meet the legal requirements set by the state, which usually is something like just getting a certain number of petition signatures. And if you win the primary election, you're the official candidate, regardless of whether formal party leaders support them or not. And I will tell you, our formal party leaders here in Brooklyn do not support our candidates, although they're singing a different tune these days with Zoran winning the primary election for the mayoralty. Really quickly, I'm gonna have to not do the staffing part, unfortunately, just to get through all of this, but I'll do it as quickly as I can. When it comes to the question of executives and accountability, this is a tricky question. The US is a presidential system. A lot of countries are not. And we have a separation of powers, theoretically, at least, if you read the news these days, between executive, legislative, and judicial branches. So countries that have a parliamentary system, they don't really have that strong separation between executives and the legislative branch. So that question doesn't really present itself, or at least it presents itself in different ways. They also have these things called motions of no confidence, which can bring down a government and trigger a snap election. Like if you get enough members of parliament to say, we have no confidence in this government, then it falls and they have to have an election where they elect a new government. We don't do that here. Instead, we use fixed elections. We have schedules, or in rare circumstances, we do things like impeachment to hold executives accountable between elections. And impeachment isn't even supposed to be used for things like ensuring accountability to a platform, but for punishing high crimes and misdemeanors. Although, of course, it's often wielded for political purposes too. And the first time it was used by the radical Republicans against Andrew Johnson, it very much was used for political purposes because they hated him, justifiably so. So the mechanisms of accountability that are available to us here, I think, are very limited, and they're largely informal or non-procedural. And I think that we basically have two very broad models available to us. One I'll call the Bernie model, and one I'll call the we can end your career model, for lack of a better name. Okay, so the Bernie model, what is that? Basically, that would entail recruiting candidates who are so principled and so committed that they'll basically never divert from movement goals and demands. Something like that places fewer demands or responsibilities, I would say, on a group like DSA. But unfortunately, electoral politics in this country tends not to select for these kinds of people. There are plenty of principled and committed people out there, including many on this call, but lots of them are not willing or able to run for office for all kinds of reasons. So I think we probably can't count on this approach once we reach a certain level of success or scale. So I think the main one, or the one that I think we've done a good job of starting to develop here in New York in particular, is like the we can make or break your career model, which basically entails making an organization like this one so indispensable to making and breaking the political career of a candidate or office holder that that they think twice about the things that they do in office. They seek to maintain alignment with a group like this one. Socialist and office committees, I think, are a really important part of the process, and they're necessary, good, useful, as both Jeremy and Claire described. I do think that they also have some limitations. They do try to, like, I would say, approximate the role that a formal party organization plays in other countries and party systems. But they don't really have the kinds of informal and institutional mechanisms of accountability that other parties can resort to. It's a lot of jawboning, it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of phone calls, that sort of thing. It can't be like, well, you can't run for office now. There's no one that could really prevent somebody from running for office, neither an SIO committee nor anyone else. And it can still be difficult to coordinate action and communication across electeds and their offices, even with one of these committees. And ultimately, DSA is not the only constituency these electeds have to respond to. Before I wrap, really quick thing on staffing. Again, in other countries, a lot of parties have like staff that work for the party that they can simply draw upon and bring into their offices and things of that nature. So that's like a resource that is available elsewhere that doesn't really quite exist here. Also particular politicians and office holders can hire their own people as well. In most other places, there's something like the equivalent, like say the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, which some people might be familiar with, which is basically an adjunct of Die Linke, the left party in Germany. There are similar organizations in many other places that, where a lot of that sort of staffing and intellectual and policy sort of development takes place. Again, that's something that we have to work on approximating, doing our best to sort of reproduce in something of an informal way here that has pluses and minuses, I think. And there you go. In a nutshell, the question of accountability, as best I could do it. Hope that was useful, and hope people learned something from it. And if anyone has any questions about any of this stuff afterwards, feel free to get in touch. Again, good to see you all. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate you coming on. And with that, we're moving on to our final section. I'm really excited for this section, our next three speakers, who are going to talk about beyond New York City, organizing in upstate New York, and organizing in smaller cities and in city halls across upstate. So first up is my very, very, very good friend, Daniel Latona, who is the Democratic nominee for City of Poughkeepsie, Ward 8. He just defeated last month. He defeated an appointed incumbent by over 60 points in the Democratic primary. And he is a leader in Middleton Valley DSA, who has recruited many, many, many members to the chapter and to DSA. and he is going to talk about what appealed to voters in Poughkeepsie and what are the top lessons that he learned on that campaign in what I call Woke Ward 8, because it's truly a pleasure to canvass in that ward. So, Dan, I'm going to unmute you, and it's all you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Aaron. Hello, comrades. My name is Daniel Tona, he, him. I am from Mid-Hudson Valley DSA. We are 678 members strong in upstate New York. I am a union member, community organizer, and chapter endorsed candidate for City of Poughkeepsie Common Council in Ward 8. It's where I live and grew up. But as I always say, my real claim to fame is that I recruited Magdalena to DSA. My campaign, the campaign that the chapter built, brought out over 100 volunteers to knock on over 3,000 doors. We had hundreds of conversations with voters across my district talking about the issues that they cared about. We raised over $12,000 with an average donation of under $60, no donations from corporations or developers. And we focused on the issues that Poughkeepsie residents really care about, which are housing, infrastructure, climate, public safety, public goods, transparency, and resisting Trump's attacks on our city. And so some of what that looks like on the local level is like, protecting tenants and homeowners, replacing lead pipes, repaving the roads, slowing down the speeding cars, a municipal composting program. These are the stuff that we were talking about. It's very much like sewer socialism. The city of Poughkeepsie. So for perspective, the city of Poughkeepsie is a city with 32,000 people. So this is not a municipality that, has a bunch of money. One of the things we talked about in the campaign is making one fare-free bus line, because the city could afford to do that, but the county controls all the other buses, and so the county would have to make them all free. But the city could pay to make one bus line free at the very least. And so, we thought about, like, how do we build a platform that is both ambitious but also realistic to, like, what can be achieved in a small city in upstate New York. And I think we did a pretty good job. I'm going to drop my website in the chat. And I'm really proud of the messaging that we ended up with, talking about running openly as a Democratic Socialist. So it was on my website, it was on my mailers, it was on my palm cards. It actually really resonated with people. And I think especially in this political moment when approval, Democratic voters are saying that their approval of the Democratic Party is at historic lows. Calling myself a Democratic Socialist, I think, was a really good way to distinguish myself from the political machine here in the city and show that we were running a different kind of campaign that was focused on just different things and putting, as my slogan is, putting Poughkeepsie over profit. We were endorsed by a whole wide range of community organizations and unions, including my union, Workers United Upstate New York, Democratic elected officials. But really what powered the campaign, the heart of the campaign, was Mid-Hudson Valley DSA. Everyone in my kitchen cabinet, DSA members, DSA members cutting the turfs, making the lists, training the canvassers, knocking the doors. I've been a member of Mid-Hudson Valley DSA for over 5 years now, and everything I know about organizing I really learned through DSA. And they definitely made my whole career. They literally made me the person I am today. I would not be an organizer or be doing anything that I'm doing in my life if it weren't for DSA teaching me and showing me that actually working class people can have political power and can exercise it to make a difference in their lives and the lives of their neighbors. I grew up in the city of Poughkeepsie, in Ward 8. But when I was a kid, my family lost our home in the Great Recession, and it took us 14 years to get back to the same neighborhood where I grew up. And it was just because we were caught up in the boom bust cycle of capitalism. And so many of the things that my family struggled with, homelessness, medical debt. I had to take a year off of college because I couldn't afford college, having to skip prescription drugs that I just couldn't afford to pick up. All of these things, these are the things that working class people go through. And I think when we run working class candidates who can speak to these issues. It actually enables us to build connections with voters. As a union member, I definitely think we should be running more labor candidates. But then I also think that we need to be running to win. I think that's the most important thing, right? And the thing that made my win possible was that, I ran in the Democratic primary. We went right to the Democratic primary voters. We had an expanded universe. We didn't just focus on a very narrow universe. We had an expanded universe, but we went to those Democratic primary voters and we talked about how democratic socialism was actually the thing that can help them win the stuff that they care about. And so, even though the political machine wasn't with me, the mayor, was working against me, and the council had appointed my opponent to the council to serve temporarily. We were able to overcome all of that and win with 83% of the vote. Now we're heading into November against a Republican opponent who's the son of a judge, a trust fund kid. But we're gonna kick him to the curb too, and we're gonna get on there, and then we're gonna think about how do we strategically identify future wards where we can run more DSA members and pick up more seats. So I'm very excited about what we're building here in Poughkeepsie, but it's only possible because of Mid-Hudson Valley DSA, and so many of the things that I've learned from people here in SMC who have taught me so many amazing things about how to run and win races. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Next up, we have Jorge D. Fendini. Jorge is another member of SMC, like Daniel. Also, like Daniel, a former member of our caucus steering committee. And Jorge is also the Democratic nominee to be on Ithaca Council for the next 2 years. He just won his primary. So if you are on the SMC steering committee, you have a very good chance of being a Democratic nominee for your city council district. There's definitely a correlation there for sure. And Jorge is going to talk about what appealed to voters in Ithaca in his race, and because he's run before and been on the council before as well, he has that experience as well. And what are the top lessons that he learned on that campaign? Let me ask Jorge to unmute, and then it's all you, Jorge.
Hey folks, thanks Aaron. Thanks everyone for hanging out so late at night. It's been great hearing everyone talk, and I'm really excited going into convention, being with you all here and just going through this really scary but also exciting moment in our life for opportunity for organizing for socialism. Like Aaron said, my name is Jorge DiFendini. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of Ithaca DSA. And I just won my primary in the city of Ithaca. Like Aaron said, I used to serve on the Common Council. I used to represent College Town when I was 22 years old. When we were first starting our sort of proto-socialist in office program, I got on with Phoebe Brown, who's another socialist in office in the city of Ithaca. And 2 years later, we made history by getting Kayla Matos elected, defeating a 12-year incumbent. And at the time, I thought I was running unopposed in College Town, and there was a secret writing campaign against me that made the news, that made the rounds in my area, ousted me. There was no public perception, no public platform or announcement done, colluding with a bunch of fraternities and in Cornell University. And I was out of my seat, but I wasn't out of organizing. I stuck around. I became the chair for the chapter the year after that. And then earlier this year, I launched my campaign when I moved into the only ward in the city that I could afford, which was the first ward, the same ward that Miss Phoebe Brown had gotten elected to. And this cycle, she is retiring. She's getting up there in age and wants to spend some time with her grandkids. And so she said, Jorge, you were one of the few people who I actually trust to sort of leave this seat to as a candidate to running. And so I threw my hat in the race. I picked a hell of a campaign manager and someone you're going to hear from later on today, Katie Sims. And we got to running. And fast forward a few months later, and I can tell you that we had a three-way race with two candidates, a conservative Democrat and a more professional, progressive, Democrat. And in that three-way race, we came out with 60% of the vote. We had over almost 400 votes, $8,000 raised, and we knocked on well over 5,000 doors. It was really incredible. One of my favorite stats is that we had more votes, volunteers, dollars raised, and canvas conversations had than both of my opponents combined. That's not just the DSA difference, that's the SMC difference, because that's mass politics, that's mass organizing. We went to where people were, we talked about the issues that they were talking about, and something that I think is really important and similar to like what we have done as other campaigns like Daniel's and Zoran's campaign is that we weren't just beholden to polls. We made polls. So at the doors and in this election cycle, high taxes was a big concern. Like Poughkeepsie, Ithaca is a cash-strapped city. We have Cornell University that doesn't pay its fair share. And so people are feeling high taxes, the high cost of living. That really gave our opponents a technical advantage in talking about austerity and cutting services and not doing these expensive programs. But we shifted our rhetoric to talking about this isn't about high taxes. This is about affordability. And we messaged on that hard, aggressively at each door, sort of using rhetorical judo to talk about how like your issue of high taxes or how expensive could be fixed if we focus on the things we can control. You know, cutting the youth services isn't going to make your job easier. Let's raise the wage. Let's end at-will employment. And Ithaca DSA is currently racing with New York City DSA to be the first city to abolish at-will employment with just cause labor protections, something I'm excited to have run on, and I'm hoping that we'll get passed during my year on council in 2026. But yeah, machines have gotten a bad rap on this call as they should, because a lot of political machines have been hostile to us. But I always like to say in Ithaca, there's only one political machine, and it's the one that we've built. This was the first race where I knocked on a number of doors and people asked, are you the DSA, the Democratic Socialist candidate? Okay, I'm voting for you. That's who I always vote for. I've knocked all over New York State, across the country. I've never really encountered that before. And it was really cool to have that happen recurringly. Another cool thing is that this is one of the first times I've seen where a DSA candidate is replacing a DSA incumbent, where that ward has made the exact choice to elect someone with explicit democratic socialist politics. And another thing that I think is really highlighting and indicative of SMC is that people really appreciate having an organizer in office, someone who really appreciates co-governance. And I don't just mean like they know the term, like, oh yeah, you believe in like working directly with mass movements and you know, are a cadre candidate. No one's thinking about that at the doors, but they appreciate the idea of someone going into office and trying to organize their colleagues and connect with different groups to pass an agenda, as opposed to just electing someone with a bunch of smart ideas and good plans. That was something that resonated with a lot of people at the doors, and I think is something that we can really pride ourselves on as a caucus, as people who take external organizing and mass politics very, very seriously. And just like so many of the other campaigns that have been mentioned, my campaign was DSA top to bottom. Katie was my incredible campaign manager, and we had almost 50 or well over 50 volunteers, which is, you know, maybe not as big as some of the folks over in New York City, but it's pretty big for a city of our size. And it really shows that, again, with having more volunteers than the other candidates combined, that people were excited to go out and come back and knock doors day in and day out. And again, because we're a chapter of our size, you know, it really does say something about the type of orientation and the politics that we subscribe to in Ithaca DSA and within this campaign. And so that's something that I'm hoping at a convention we can talk about with other chapters, is that, you know, you don't need to have this complex or this idea of like, oh, we're not like New York City, we're not like Mid-Hudson Valley, we don't have these thousands of members. It's a mindset, and like having this big politics, this mass politics mindset is something that any chapter can do, and we should be doing. We have to seize the moment by going to where the masses are, organizing them, responding to their issues, and showing up. That was last thing I'll say is that I think a bit that led to a lot of success for us was that people knew, not just myself as a candidate who had shown up at different actions and protests and at public comment, but also to DSA. They knew that DSA was on the front lines of fighting back against, back the blue supporters back in 2020, that they've been fighting for just cause and a living wage, that they've been on every picket line, whether it's Workers United or UAW. They knew who we were. And so that's why they knew who we were at the doors. And that's why they threw their weight behind us. And so I think that's a model for a lot of cities our size and for the organization at whole. And I'm hoping to talk about it more with people throughout the coming days and at convention. But I'm really excited to just be here with you all. So thanks for this incredible opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Our final speaker is somebody who Jorge just mentioned, Katie Sims. Katie is a member of the National Electoral Commission Steering Committee. They've served as Ithaca's Electoral Committee Chair for the last few years. They've coordinated 3 local field campaigns in Ithaca to elect socialists, including Jorge's recent reelection. And they are running for the National Political Committee on the SMC slate. And Katie is going to talk about the direction that the NEC needs to take and that National DSA and DSA generally needs to take to build power across the country. So Katie will be our final speaker, and if we have time at the end, we will fit in a couple questions if we can. So I'm going to ask Katie to unmute, and then Katie can take it away.
Yeah, I am so it's been such a wonderful evening to hear from all these wonderful SMC members about the work that we are doing that is like actually transforming the world that we're living in, that's making it easier to make ends meet, that's giving us opportunities to build more working class power, and that is like proving real repeatable strategies for winning these kinds of races and winning this power and building, something with real momentum that we can take forward and grow. And I am running for the National Political Committee this year, and I think that is the what we are bringing to convention, right? We're bringing to convention in SMC, we're bringing a politics, we're bringing an ideology, we're bringing points of unity, but we're also really bringing the skills and experience that we've built in our chapters to run these kinds of, to run these winning campaigns and show that we are not just a book club, we're not just an ideological society, we're a group of people who have goals and are going to accomplish them. And I'm laughing at the cat watching the call. Sorry, I got distracted. But I've been serving on the National Electoral Committee Steering Committee for the last 2 years, and like there are so many opportunities across the country for us to take power and to change things. And there's like New York City, like we know you all are like knocking millions of doors, you're winning like hundreds of thousands of votes, it's all very impressive. But there's also like tons of places across the country where the institutions are just like so hollowed out that you can take a lot of power with very few people. And that like if we are strategic about it, like we can really, really expand our impact quite quickly. And Jorge's first campaign is like a really good example of this. The ward that he represented included Cornell University, which has a $5 billion annual budget and a $10 billion endowment, and is a ward where like 60 people decide the election. And it is the bar is really low in so many places across the country. And even in places where, we think like, oh, it's a right-wing state, we should throw it out, it's a red state, we can't do anything there. There are winnable campaigns. And there are places where we can, and we don't have to shy away from being democratic socialists. We don't have to like be kind of like conservative coded. We don't have to give up our like social values in favor of just economic populism. We can do all of it and we can keep winning. And to kind of turn this towards convention, which is a week from today, we're gonna all get, many of us are gonna gather in Chicago and we're gonna make big decisions about where the organization is going in the next couple of years. And I really want to encourage everyone to like bring the excitement that we've had on this call and bring the appreciation for our socialist majority strategy to convention and to talk to people on the floor about it, because we're going to need the votes to win. convention, both for the resolutions, but also for the NPC elections, because you know, kind of even more than the resolutions that we vote on, the NPC is going to decide whether we're going to like run congressional races in the midterm, whether we're going to get ready for a 2028 presidential campaign, and whether we're going to have the volunteer and, you know, the volunteer canvas force to make it happen, and whether that force is going to be strong enough to be the people who are calling our electeds on the phone and saying like, you have to do this, and we have the stakes behind it to back it up. You know, I can call Jorge on the phone just myself and say, you know, I can ruin your whole career if you don't do this. But when more people get involved in the election, it takes a lot more than just one person. And so we need to be that field force to back it up. We can be, and the power that we've built is just the beginning. So let's keep building it.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you to all our speakers. We are slightly over time, but we're going to fit in a couple and emphasize on a couple questions before we break. So what I'm going to do, I think just for the sake of time, if folks want to put any questions they have, we're not going to do stack, but if you have a question you want to write out in the chat, we'll throw it to our panelists if anyone wants to take a crack at it. We'll do a couple, and then we're gonna break for the call. So let's see if we have any questions in the chat that folks want to type out. Can someone expand on the staffing topic? I know Chris wanted to maybe talk about that, but didn't have the time. I'm gonna let people unmute themselves so people can just go ahead and jump in. So there's a staffing question. If Chris, you want to take that and also talk about staffing.
I already talked a bunch, so you know, one thing that I'll just quickly reiterate is, you know, as I was saying before, in many other countries, when a party is able to like get enough votes to get seats in parliament, they get money from the government to fund a research and policy institute. As I said before, in Germany, Die Linke's version of this is the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, the Social Democratic Conservative, all the other parties you know, have versions of this too. And organizations like that often are the places where things like policy development is done, or it's sort of the play. It's like here in the U.S., like I don't know, Center for American Progress is something that sort of fits a similar bill. But again, that's not like a party organization. It's something that exists outside formally of, say, the Democratic Party. But we see, like, you know, whenever somebody from basically that faction of the party gets elected president or something like that, a bunch of cat people go and like work in their administration, for example. You know, when Bill Clinton got elected, a bunch of DLC, Democratic Leadership caucus, I think it was caucus, not actually committee, people like went in to go work in that administration. So again, like we are always doing things here in the US that like approximate what parties and similar organizations in other countries do, but kind of like in weird, loose, amorphous ways. And yeah, that's I think where a lot of the staffing, relationships, training, development, to the extent that it exists, kind of comes from labor. Like, you know, in countries where there actually is something like a labor party or a labor linked social democratic party, you'll see people go back and forth between staffs of, you know, government staffs, cabinets, things like that, and the trade unions that the party is based on, and vice versa. So but yeah, I talked much before, so I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Chris. What we're going to do is I'm going to throw it to Jeremy, who raised his hand to answer one of the questions. And I'll take one more speaker, one of our speakers after Jeremy to answer a question if you want to raise your hand. And then we'll call it at that. So Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, there were two I was going to speak to really quickly. One was on national legislative work. I'm trying to find the exact language, the next step for national co-governance, especially legislation drafting. And I do think like you know, a very interesting thing about our organization is a number of us have very strong feelings, sometimes well-deserved, about federal electeds, and very few of us do much work to advance socialism on the congressional level. It's not primarily, the heart of DSA, and this is a good thing, is in our chapters, but kind of we have not done that much coordinated national work or even on a chapter level work on moving legislation, moving socialist priorities on a national level, intervening in national affairs. That's perhaps right now, like most evident in the organization's kind of, in my view, quite serious and significant failure to do anything to oppose the Medicaid cuts and to take what was a prime organizing opportunity to organize people away from the right. We just didn't do that much. And some of that is capacity, and some of that is will. And I think our national organization, its leadership has not been focused on let's do big, externally oriented campaigns on a national level to both to enable chapters to engage on that level of government and to make DSA a national force. I think things like expertise in bill drafting, things like having closer relationships with federal SIOs and really doing co-governance with them is going to depend on us dialing up in that direction. I think there have been some shining moments in our organization's history. The Medicare for All campaign, the PRO Act campaign, and the No Money for Massacres campaign all come to mind as moments where our national organization took really seriously intervening on federal level issues. But I think it's that time for us again, especially with Trump in power. And we have to do it, and we need an NPC that's willing to do that, and that has the political vision and commitment. So that is part of why I'm running, and not to toot own horn. And I do think like we should take that really seriously, how important convention organizing is for whether our organization will be significant on a national level. Then really quickly to Comrade Brown's question about the collapse of the Democratic Party. My view of the party surrogate model has always been as articulated, I think, in still like a classic piece on this by Jared Abbott and Dustin Guastella in Catalyst some years ago, is basically like, the party surrogate model is essentially agnostic about what happens in the next phase of a political crisis. And I think there's like many ways that could go as we build our forces, as we build our power. Democratic elites are going to have various ways to try and react to that. Moreover, as the center disappears from American public life, they are going to have various ways to react to that. Some of those ways could look like what happened in Britain, which is the purging of the left from the party and an opportunity to say, hey, this is like basic democracy has been violated here, and stand with us who, won your votes and now are being purged from being effective voices for your interests in government, and would be a real opportunity to win masses away to a different potentially political formation. Other possibilities are, radical transformation of the existing party for a period, like what happened, say, with the Republican Party during the Civil War, and after in the radical Reconstruction period. I think we don't have the power exactly to decide what happens in the next phase. What we should be prepared for is to intervene maximally with the organizing tools that we've been developing to win more people over to our politics, our ideology, our theory of change. And I think, Bernie Sanders is a shining example of that, of doing whatever is required to build the power of the people, to build the power of social movements, to build the power of democratic socialist ideas in all sorts of different formations, moments, circumstances. And I think, in my view, that's the preparation we do. We build our party surrogate and we prepare for the next phase, which very well could be the Democratic Party completely collapsing and an opportunity for a new left party to step in.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I think we only have time for one more question. If any of our speakers wants to raise their hand. I will say there's one question I think we could answer, which is someone asking, how can they get involved as a new national YDSA member? So if any of our speakers want to jump in on that or any other question, we'll take one more before we close out.
is the question like specifically not being in a why do you say chapter?
Not quite
Or
sure.
just in general? Well, what I'll say is like that I think they're in New York City. Well, then I'll pass it to New York City DSA person because there's so many things to say.
Yeah, I would say definitely come to a DSA 101. We have them on our website on socialist.nyc. Definitely really well done events that introduce everyone to DSA if you haven't gone to one already. And our calendar is chock full of events. So whatever you want to get involved in, game nights, different working groups, there's something for everyone on there. Thank you, Eric, for dropping that link in the chat. So really hope to see you around at some of our events, getting involved. Coffee with Comrades. Yes, thank you. Thank you to New York City. Magdalena, thank you. Thank you to folks for dropping links in the chat for that. Yeah, so thank you all so much. We're going to close out now. We're a little bit over time, but appreciate you all staying on so late. Appreciate you all listening to all our amazing speakers. Thank you to all our speakers, everyone who attended. Thank you to Vincent, especially, for putting this all together and making this all possible. So thank you so much, Vincent. And yeah, everyone, please, if you're not already in DSA, please join DSA. If you're already in DSA, consider joining Socialist Majority Caucus. Someone should drop the socialistmajority.com link in the chat. You should definitely consider applying to join the caucus if you're a DSA member who believes in our politics. If you are a delegate at convention next week, first of all, looking forward to seeing you all in Chicago. And I encourage you to consider voting for our proposals on our website and voting for our candidates. You heard from 2 of the 7 tonight, from Jeremy and Katie. So please consider ranking them at the very top of your ballot so we can help send them to our national political committee, our national leadership, and growing our organization and bringing the lessons that we've learned from New York and bringing them to the national level. So this has been a wonderful call. Thank you all so much for coming on, and have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, comrades. Solidarity forever.
Solidarity.
Solidarity, everybody.